Danielle, what's our podcast called again? Do we have a specific
Trending
name for it?
Upwards.
Trending Upwards. Is that
Yeah.
what we're called? Do we not have our own special name or not?
That's our name.
Trending Upwards. Cool.
That's us three, isn't it? That's the SEO gang.
I thought we had something cool, a bit cooler than that. No?
I think Andrew made it up.
Yeah, Trending Upwards is cool. Sorry, Andrew, if you listen to this. Right, well, welcome back to Trending Upwards. This is our third podcast? I think it's our third.
Yeah, it is.
Third podcast.
I think so.
Production value is not as high on this one, unfortunately, because some of us are working remotely, some of us are in the office, and Jonathan isn't here to set up the cameras for us as well. So we're in separate meeting rooms at the moment.
Yeah.
But today, I thought it'd be useful to have a chat about thin content, really. So it was something that was brought up with a client yesterday. They were looking to upload a very, very large number of pages to their site all at once. And I was a little bit concerned about the quality of these pages. And from their point of view, they were like, what harm can it do? Let's just upload them, see what happens. It's not going to do any harm. If it does do any harm, we'll just take them down. Everything will be fine. They even suggested creating another subdomain just to chuck these on, and we're under the impression that it would rank kind of immediately. And get them lots of traffic. I just wanted to get you guys on the call, really, and just to see if it's, I guess, have you had this challenge with clients in the past about educating them about what thin content is, and just kind of what your opinions are on the subject as well?
It's the key issue for me with thin content is that this content has very limited value, regardless of what you actually produce. I've seen it used in the past. It is an old tactic, and it is an old tactic that was successful, but we're talking 10, 15 years ago when it was successful. Google's moved on tremendously since then. There's no way in a million years that I would recommend it for clients now. And the reasoning behind that is because, quite simply, the amount of effort and time that it takes to do it isn't worth the return.
And it's like you just littering the internet, isn't it? You're just throwing loads of stuff out there that isn't useful. Well,
Google doesn't like it. And the other thing to remember as well with thin stroke duplicate content is there is no such thing as a penalty for that. The truth of the matter is that Google just ignores that content. So what's the point of making it? If there's no point investing time and effort in something that A, is not going to give any value to your customers or your visitors, and B, won't even get indexed or saved in the Google database, so it's not going to get found anywhere. So those are two key things really within content, and the reasoning behind it. I mean, I've worked in the past with clients as well. A perfect example of why thin content doesn't work, or boilerplate. Some people call it boilerplate. It's just the same content with a few changes. Originally, when Google wasn't that clever, what they would do is they would use the keywords that were included in the URL and on the page in order to determine where it should appear. And it worked, and using boilerplate or thin content worked extremely well for geo-targeted stuff. When we talk about that, we're talking about, say, for example, divorce solicitors in Blackburn, Bolton, Preston, Clitheroe, whatever, and that was really successful, to be honest. But what we found was the big problem, which highlighted the issues of user experience, really was that these sites that had hundreds and hundreds of pages for each of the towns and the cities and the areas in the UK, they would suddenly get a phone call for example, for divorce solicitors, and the phone call would be in Surrey, and they were based in Blackburn. Now they can't do anything about that. They can't honour that. So what's the point of having content to drive business to your site, which isn't going to give you the relevant returns? So that's one of the reasons why, you know, the content that we write has to be extremely relevant to the individuals that we're targeting.
I've recently experienced that actually with a friend of mine who's a landscape gardener, and he was saying like, oh, I'm doing a few bits of, you know, a few web bits for my boss. And he was like, we've actually got loads of kind of local subdomains that they're creating. So, you know, Surrey.website, things like that, getting all this local content and trying to get them to, and getting them to rank. And I was like, why?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
They can only service a small area.
Exactly.
So you know, a lot of this traffic's not going to be relevant. And it's a very manipulative tactic.
Yeah.
You know, which could get you in trouble as well. So
the
risk reward isn't there for me. And
well, I mean, following on from that, my nephew he's a landscape gardener, and he's realised, you know, that that tactic doesn't work. He looked at it, and like I said, the problem was that, you know, there's only him on his own, and he can't really service any further than the Oldham area, really. So what that means is that there's no point in him trying to target other areas or other services that he can't do. That's pointless doing that. So he did the flip side, and he went hyperlocal. And when we talk about hyperlocal, we're talking about, you know, just a very specific area. He just started advertising in the local newspapers and in the local magazines, and consequently he's got enough work for himself to keep himself busy. So you've got to look at that. And what I'm trying to say with that really is that you need to understand your client base and where they're based and what you can do with those clients successfully. Being realistic.
I agree with you guys. I think we wouldn't recommend putting loads of pages up with thin content. I've been in a situation where we've not built a website, but we've had it with pages with not a lot of content on. So you've done your keywords, you've done your on-page optimization, you've done a bit of internal linking, you've done everything you think you can with the H1s, etc. But if you compare to the competitors, you're never going to outrank them with little content of no value. You need to be that authority and the go-to page for whatever the service is. So it is tricky, and you can recommend it, and we can obviously book it in with content, but you can't really make much movements until you've got a full page of value. It's not even just crap on the page either. It needs to be valuable.
Exactly.
You know what we're talking about, very specific, better than what else is out there to rank above everyone.
Well, there's the idea of this. There's the idea of the skyscraper model, isn't there, that's used in SEO, which is, you know, identify the keywords that you want to rank for, identify those sites that are ranking for those keywords, and essentially build better content than they've got. It's as simple as that. And the time and effort that you spend doing that is much more valuable than you'll ever spend doing 200 pages of thin content. You know, because you're going to get conversions from that. You're never going to get a conversion from a very thin piece of content.
Yeah, that's kind of the challenge I had with the client yesterday. It was kind of trying to educate them on what quality content is. And with a lot of these pages, like you said earlier, Adrian, they were essentially boilerplate, and they were almost just changing the city or country name out within the piece, and the content was quite generic. In their opinion, the content was good. You know, these were going to be pillar pages, which are going to be supported by other content. And I was like, you appreciate that they might think that this content is good. However, in Google's eyes, you know, it's not unique enough. It doesn't add enough value. And also, second to that, is targeting a lot of keywords which weren't relevant to them. So, you know, there's no point ranking for keywords that aren't relevant or aren't going to bring you enough traffic.
Yeah.
are going to convert.
Well, you will, regardless of whether you want it or not, you will rank for keywords that you don't want to. That's just the nature of Google, because of the way it's built. It's built so that, you know, it targets those keywords. So you will find when you look through your keyword ranking stuff that you, through your reports and that, you'll find that, you know, why am I ranking for this? Well, it's because you've got the keyword on this certain page in Google. It triggers certain things within Google that makes it rank you in a specific position for that. But yeah, I think the thing to, like you said, the thing is reminding people that content, you know, quality content is far more important than having lots of content. I mean, 10-15 years ago, it was almost like a real estate thing, where we look at it from the principle of the more pages you've got, the more chance you have of being found. But Google the algorithms moved on that much, and it's involving AI now, and it's so much more sophisticated that it doesn't need a huge amount of pages. It just needs the relevant content, the valuable content that people are searching for, and that's the important thing to stress with clients. And a lot of clients struggle to understand that, you know, we don't need as many pages, and sometimes we don't need as much traffic. It's the quality of the traffic as well, and the quality of the content that drives the success of a site.
That's it. And I think especially when you know, the term kind of content is king and 10x content and things like that, they get bandied around a lot. And I think especially what I found helpful on the call yesterday was that some of the keywords that we were looking at, I was like, look, let's take a look on the call. Let's have a look at what's ranking in the top 3 positions. Let's have a look at their content. How are they supporting that content? And what you'd find for the most competitive keywords, they've got a really valuable guide. They've got amazing graphics. It's a really well-designed page. They've got great videos. And then those pages are supported by 5 or 6 other pages as well. So it's just kind of trying to educate the client. This is quality content. You know, we want to make something better than that, but this is what Google sees as quality. You know, just having a long generic boilerplate page, whilst that would have ranked, like you said, that would have ranked 10 years ago, and it would have ranked really well, but it's not going to cut the mustard anymore.
I mean, the thing to remember with, you know, like with content is that you're not just answering one question from or one piece of searcher intent. What you're actually looking at is when somebody looks for a specific thing, Google is not just looking for that term, it's looking for the relevant terms around it and the relevant answers and questions around it. That's part of the reason why they've moved towards the new updates, the AI ones like BERT, which is AI, and also MUM, which is the new very latest one within the last month. And what it's trying to do with those algorithms is understand searcher intent, but also try and understand future searcher intent. And that's an important thing. That's why content, that's why stuff like HubSpot, you know, with the content, with the cluster pages and the pillars works so well, because you're not just answering the initial question or searcher intent. What you're doing is you're bringing them to a site where they've got answers to the other questions that they're going to be asking at some point in the future. That's why when you look in Google you've got that section that people also ask, because that's a throwback to when they used to, when it wasn't as sophisticated, the algorithm, and when it wasn't as sophisticated, it thought, right, we'll answer that question, but we know they're going to want to know the answers to these other questions in relation to that. And that's the thing that Google's doing now. And that's why when we produce quality content, like I said, guides, that's why guides work so well. And also when you answer all those questions.
I think when you just do the page with the thin content on, all it kind of does is triggers all the SEO tools as a duplicate, and then you're working through it all. And the main problem is the tools think it's the same page, so Google will probably think it's the same page in a duplicate and not prioritize it over other things. So it is a waste of time.
I mean, Google wants people who visit the Google search engine to have the best experience possible. And the best way for that to happen is to have the content that's valuable, but also have the answers to other questions as well.
Yeah.
So that's why boilerplate doesn't work anymore, because they're landing on an individual page, but they're not finding any other content around it.
Yeah, they want to please the user, don't they? So the user can keep coming back.
I mean, there was an attempt to fix that, like 10 years ago with SEO, when what people would do is they would add extra content on the bottom of the page. So, for example, if it was a geo-targeted piece of content, they start writing about Clitheroe, all about the things in Clitheroe and what's, there's a castle and all this sort of stuff at the bottom. But that's not relevant.
Yeah,
that's
content for the sake of content.
Yeah, it's just content exactly for the sake of it.
It's a beat, isn't it?
Yeah, and the thing to remember as well, you've got to remember with content is content costs money. Whether it's good content or bad content, it's always going to cost you money. So why in the world would you ever write bad content when you can write good content? So you need good copywriters to write that content. If you're paying a premium for it, that's fine, because over time you're going to get that money back. Because you're going to get the traffic back. If you go out and say, right, let's have 200 pages all the same, it's just going to take as much effort to load those up and to build those pages as it is to create one piece of 1,500 word content. And the thing is as well, you will never ever get a share off thin content. You'll never get a link share, or you'll never get a social share off it.
With your content, it doesn't immediately rank as well. So you want to spend the time to get it amazing, wait probably 6 months, and then hopefully you'll be the best. But I think because there is a way, it's worth investing at the start that it's amazing, and you're backing it and you continuously improve to get ahead of the competition, really.
Yeah, and that goes back to the client that I was dealing with yesterday. I said, look, let's break this down into chunks. We'll break it down over the year. What we're going to do is we're going to go through each country page, and we're going to make sure that they're the best they can be. If I think that these pages are thin, or are going to flag any algorithmic issues, we'll book it in with our writers and we'll get it rewritten, and we're going to do it right from the start. Because the worst thing you can do is rush everything, dump all these pages on the site, really low quality, and just start getting affected by Panda or things like that. It's not worth the risk. And then they suggested, sort of, as I said earlier, putting it on a subdomain, surely to rank. And it's like, it doesn't work like that anymore, unfortunately. You can't just put a site up, put a bit of content, you automatically rank on page one, with low quality links that are paid for somewhere, that you bought off.
It may work at hyperlocal level, but if you're an international client or a national client, it's not going to work the same.
That's it. You kind of find that sometimes, I'm sure you guys have seen it as well, when you look at a lot of the local listings, that sometimes the quality isn't as good, is it, really, on those not so competitive keywords.
But the flip side of that is that it might be ranking well because Google's no choice. There is no other content in relation to that. But you will always notice that even though you might have the only piece of content, Google My Business will always appear above it. And
the thing is, the clients aren't in it day to day. They hear the odd thing, but it is for us to push back if we think it isn't of value, because you'd hate them to waste a year and not get anything from it, and then the results are a nightmare. And it is a bit on us, like we're kind of accountable. So it's definitely educating, like you said at the start. And
well, it's our role to do that, isn't it, Danielle? To actually explain to clients why they should be doing this and why they shouldn't. And it's a constant changing process. I mean, we've seen two major updates already this year from Google, and it's very much a case now that Google is constantly updating and making new iterations and changing things for different services as well, not necessarily just for the whole of the internet. It might be, that it needs to change something for a specific group of businesses. in order to make them rank more effectively. But in terms of, like I said, going back to the idea of thin content, I would never ever recommend it for any of the clients going forward. You need to look at quality content that will make a difference. Because I've said it before, I mean, people just don't link to thin content. They link to guides, they link to information that's relevant, that's really important. It's got to be up to date. That's the other problem. The other problem you've got with thin content is you've got 250 pages which relate to a specific service. What happens if you change something in that service or that service offering? You've got to change 250 pages.
Yeah, and
it's a massive task.
Is it, what stage are they at? Are they at awareness? Are they at decision? It's not just we need content, is it? It's tailoring it as much as possible.
Absolutely.
To bring in the right people. So it is a lot to consider, and it probably is quite daunting for clients as well to know where to start with it all. So yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think after that phone call, they definitely took on our opinions, and that they're more than happy to do this in stages.
Yeah,
I guess the reason we are an elite HubSpot agency is because we are experts, and we've got to tell clients, if their SEO is rubbish, we need to tell them it's rubbish. However, this is what we're going to do to fix it. And we have that plan with them. But I think they always appreciate that, especially when we're doing web projects. Some people can be quite direct about the issues, but again, that's why people come to us. We're the experts. And we've got to protect ourselves as well, and make sure that we have told them, look, we need to adhere to Google guidelines. This is the best way to attack this challenge, and they can take that advice or leave it. But if they wanted to do well, then they should listen to us.
I mean, I think the last thing to take from this, really, in terms of thin content, is being quite blunt. Don't do it, because it's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you time, and at some point in the future, it's going to be worth absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Not useful. And
it may even cause you some heartache when you have to update 250 pages in the future, which is can happen. I mean, I've seen it with legal services where they've used boilerplate, and then the SRA, the Solicitors Regulation Authority, said every single page that includes information about divorce lawyers has to have our logo on it. So I had one client that had 80 odd pages that had to all be amended.
Yeah.
They had to pay the developer to amend the footer on those pages, but they had to build a custom footer because they also had 90 pages on a completely different legal service.
Yeah.
So it cost them even more money in the long term, and the pages weren't doing anything. And in the end, they just pulled the pages down. Yeah. Because they just weren't doing anything for them.
It's a lot of hours wasted, isn't it? And
exactly.
Yeah, and it just kind of leads us back to the, take your time, seek an expert opinion, and take that advice, and make sure that the quality is content. The content is quality. It's going to generate links in the long run with a proper outreach program, and you are going to start ranking.
Yeah.
And I guess if anyone watching this is kind of confused about thin content, is my content thin? Obviously, drop any comments down below the video, and we'll happily get in touch. Drop us an email as well, and someone can take a look for you and give you some advice on what to do.
We'd love to have a chat with you about your SEO.
That's it. And content and PPC and
everything else.
Development, everything.
We just want to make the internet a better place.
That's it. Yeah.
Sold that, guys. I don't need to add anything. You've sold it.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm really hoping, Danielle, have you been recording as well? Because you are definitely frozen on my screen, and I'm really hoping you're
Oh,
not frozen on the whole video.
Yeah.
Oh, you've just unfrozen.
You've been fine all along on mine.
Okay.
Oh, maybe we should do that next time, 2 records.
Yeah. Hopefully, it's not going to be the case.
Not cool.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Well, that was lovely. Jonathan and Molly, when you're watching this, I hope it's really exciting. And,
I hope my face isn't frozen. If it is,
yes, can you
still
unfreeze
in the
Danielle? Or
history.
can we sort of superimpose a face onto like a moving map?
We can use my Euros drawing Dave did.
Yes.
In
Should we just put the
position
Euros
if
drawings
you
up?
Yeah, the Euro drawings. I'd looked at that thing. I thought it was like a bit of like a creepy dating app type thing, weren't it? Especially when Faisal was going out with Faisal.
Yeah.
But yeah,
really good.
but if you're watching this, Molly, wake up.
Yeah, it's time to wake up now, isn't it? Sorry for boring you for the last half an hour.
Yeah.
Right, thanks, guys.
Brilliant.
Super. All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you from the D22 SEO team.
Yeah.
And, any questions? Drop them below, and we'll get back in touch.